The Trump administration has come out and they have said that they're going to deprioritize all kinds of white collar crime.
Yeah.
However, healthcare, one of
It's
the areas
not
to focus
included.
on. Exactly.
Hi, we're back for another session of our Different Roles, Shared Goals pod series. And this week, we really want to talk about should all screen fails be paid for? So, this is certainly not a new topic. I had seen in the last, say, 2 weeks or so, several different newsletters pop up, examples of contracts that individuals were dealing with or were, reaching out to the community. And so I thought this was the most timely of our many, many questions in this series to talk about. And I would say let's start with from the sponsor's perspective for both of us.
Sure. So for me, it comes down to a few different things. So number one, it comes down to the fact that this is if you keep it unchecked and you just go all screen fails should be paid for, which is what all sites want, and understandably so, because these are actual costs sites will incur. Sponsors are saying, number one, what is the check and balance on this? If you can do a screen fail on every single one and you get paid for it, that's an unlimited amount of money, and I, as a sponsor, can be on the hook for an
For all
unlimited
of it.
amount of money.
Right.
It's ridiculous. The part that no one talks about, and here's the unsaid part, it becomes a potential kickback. You cannot be in a situation where a sponsor is paying a doctor, which is the PI in this case, an unlimited amount of money, as long as they go, no, we had a screen fail.
Right.
Obviously, the moment you have a screen fail, then the question becomes, what is fair market value for that? And again, that becomes an additional cost that goes on. So you have to cap the
Goes
number of
way
screen
down.
fails.
Well, okay, but so here's my thought because I actually completely agree with you. If I'm the sponsor at the end of the day, I don't not recognize that someone out there performing the research can't always detect a screen fail. Sometimes everything looks right. I did all the right steps and it's truly down to a particular lab or test and it comes back out of range and that is just it, right? And there is nothing that could have predicted that. And so as a sponsor, I don't want to not recognize your time and your effort spent on that. I'm really not trying to be a jerk. I think there is a notion at times, or at least this is how it's perceived by sites, that there's a thought that sites would abuse that unlimited privilege, that they wouldn't look as hard for the right patients because they could make money off of the wrong patients. And admittedly, then you start to go down a big rabbit hole, right, of not only unlimited budget, kickback, many other, fraud and compliance concerns. So my first question is, how could a sponsor define essentially a well-intentioned screen fail?
My perspective on that is, number one, if you are a sponsor, you should have a pretty decent idea of, let's say we're talking genetics. How often, because that's one of those situations where you go, you literally have no idea what the genes are, right? However, what you do know is that this gene occurs X number of times. So you do have a sense of, you know what, 1 in 5 people should have this gene. If that's true, your screen fail rate should be in the range of 1 in 5. It can be 1 in 6, it can be 1 in 7, it can be 1 in 3.
Right.
But if you go, you know what, I'm going to pay for every single one of them. No, you have a pretty decent idea of what that screen fail rate is.
Yeah.
If you say that I'm going to pay for only up to 15, well, it means that you're not actively considering what the genetics reflect.
And that's what I think, to be fair, the sites that I know who truly try to see it from the CRO and sponsor perspective as well, and understand there's not a blanket budget and there's not a, cash tree outside and all the things, right? That's really what they want and what they're trying to advocate is like, look, if I go out there and I just pick up everyone off the street to make money, you have a right to cap me. You have a right to come after me. That's fraud. And also, I don't want to do that. That's not what I'm in it for. Rather, when you hand me a protocol, like you gave a great example where I absolutely am going to only see this in, one out of every so many patients, that is just a statistical value that we know going in, which means I absolutely will have a certain rate of screen fail I can't prevent. And then you set a completely superfluous or, random, if you will, non-data driven screen fail cap. I'd be pissed too. It'd be like, look at your own protocol. And, let's make a reasonable cap based on actual data and numbers. And I understand it's not black and white. It's not as if every trial has a really easy way to say, the propensity, the number, et cetera. There's definitely going to be some ones that I'm sure all of the wonderful folks in our comments will point out are much harder than what we are alluding to. But I do think that this is really an important concept. And I think it's something that this is a great example of where you need the lawyer and the contract negotiator in the room to give you the ideas to say, I mean, we could define this. We could do this in a way that is fair to all and prevents fraud and compliance while also appropriately compensating. But I also think the sites would respond accordingly. I think they would respond very reasonably to that. They're not expecting a blanket check, they just don't want to be put in a position where they have to eat costs from the moment they accept the study, knowing that the, screen cap fail was set arbitrarily.
I think this is where someone like me or someone like you comes into play. And let's be honest, you and I don't always get into this level of conversation because we don't have to. But the fact is, when sponsors set up these contracts, lawyer, go set up a contract. And the sponsor lawyer goes, 1 in 3 sounds reasonable, and we'll just move on with it. The truth is, I have a clinical doctorate. I have worked as a pharmacist. I can look up these numbers. If you're a sponsor and you're defining the clinical trial agreement, have you come to me and go, let's collaboratively design what the screen fail rate should
Yep.
be.
Enjoying our content? We'd love to hear more. Please like, share, comment, and find more on our website. You don't understand what's even available, right? Like you don't understand that that's a moving number, that that's a sliding scale, that it is completely allowable by your FDA regulations to change it, and that that's not an issue that's not going to become like you don't understand the entire context of where you are. So some of it is you need that research experience, that life sciences legal experience, and then I absolutely agree. Then you've got to have a scientific mind to say what is appropriate. But I also think if someone like yourself can quickly and easily assess that, just as simply as we're talking, this can't be a level of effort burden for a sponsor to do this that's insurmountable. And if it would create a better, not only compensation model for sites, but also essentially a better relationship between sponsors, CROs, and sites, right? That really creates the right environment for patients to be well cared for because the site's not worrying about every patient screen fail. And frankly, now neither is the sponsor, right? They've come to this agreement. I think you also see a real benefit to the research community at large, right? It could put something like this not to bed forever. You're still going to have to negotiate, but it could really take this from a hot button issue down to something that has been asked and answered and negotiated. And now we have a new standard, and this is simply how we do it using data that we've always had available.
I would take it one step further. I think we just talked a little bit about how sponsors can do this, but the fact is, sites have the PI. If your
Mhm.
PI is saying that I am the right PI for this, you as the clinical trial negotiator at the site side need to be talking to the PI, and the fact is most don't. You can go, hey, we have X number of screen fails. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
not having that conversation.
The clinical trial negotiator may be in very close contact with their PI, especially at some of the smaller sites that we work with, right? Where there's, only so many people. So they really are, but they don't know to ask this question. Or maybe you don't feel empowered to go back to the sponsor and cross negotiate and say, hey, so I see you want a screen fail cap. Completely respect that. Having said that, scientifically, I've spoken to my PI. What makes sense in this particular study with this particular design would be the following percentage, which equals this number, not the number that you've provided to me. So could you maybe give me the data on which you're basing this number, and or is this under negotiation? Because I just want to base this on data. I'm not against having a cap, but I do want to base this on this particular protocol design. That way you get compensated correctly. And again, everyone avoids the compliance nightmare of any type of kickback schema, right? Like there's just no problems, no concern there because you have rational data documented to show how that works. And you've now established with that sponsor, if it's someone you work on multiple different trials or indications with, that is the way you do business, right? Which is great
Data
because then
driven.
you can keep doing that as a precedent in all of your future trials.
Find related podcasts
Here.
And I would point out that right now, the Trump administration has come out and they have said that they're going to deprioritize all kinds of white collar crime.
Yep.
However, healthcare is going to
It's not
continue
included.
to be one of
It's
the areas
not
to focus
included.
on. Exactly.
And so I do think that's a part where truly no fear mongering intended. I do think that's something we have to keep eyes on in this particular space because I think that a lot of folks, especially when we talk about compliance around things like kickback, do tend to gravitate toward, well, I'm a small site. I'm just one trial out of millions. Why would they look at me? And to be fair, there's some truth to that. Like you are not the highest risk on the radar. Okay. Having said that, if you are going to reduce efforts at other white collar crime and not reduce it in healthcare, I mean, that's pretty much like the federal government telling you there's a target here.
I think that the large academic institutions are being targeted by things like ORI, for example. And they have large compliance departments, and you and I have worked with those compliance departments where that oversight is being demonstrated. Smaller sites, you're actually seeing cases go all the way down. And we're talking about, I'm not saying it happens every single day, but I am saying that you're seeing big cases with multiple years of jail sentences that are going, and those are cases of extreme fraud. This is not a case of extreme fraud. However, if you're seeing kickbacks where people are being given unlimited budgets, you absolutely would have a problem. The fact is that this is hopefully, if it's just one brick, it's just one brick. But if you have multiple bricks, you're starting to build a wall, and that's when you need to be careful.
Like I said, folks to be able to take away that they have that right and that ability to negotiate. And it's not just about the being an attorney or being empowered enough to do it. It's truly about the data. We are in a scientific business, and this is a number that should be based per protocol, per indication, on the appropriate data presented that clinical experts would agree is the right percentage to appropriate for a screen failure rate. And that's a reasonable compensation. It keeps everyone on track. It keeps everyone compliant. And it really, like we said earlier, creates an opportunity to end this conversation in a positive way.
Perfect. Love it. Call, click, or email.